If you're wondering about the difference between Azure AI Studio and Copilot Studio, or in fact, Azure OpenAI Studio and the bot framework and all of these pieces that allow us to create copilots, I'm going to take you through an explanation and a demo here to help you get this sorted out. So Azure AI Studio and Copilot Studio are actually two quite different things. And it's not necessarily one or the other, they do work together. So to start with, what I'm going to do is give you a bit of a demo walkthrough of Azure AI Studio, and then we're going to spend most of the time having a look at the Copilot Studio experience so that you can get that real sense and understanding of what these tools do and how you can choose which one to use and when. So to help you understand this, I'm going to frame this up using 3 C words: cost, complexity, and another phrase called conversational orchestration. Now, I reckon as we go through this video, I'm going to come up with more C words. Don't worry, we're not going anywhere near anything that we shouldn't put on YouTube. Let me know how many you find as I go along here. Copilot is also going to be another one of them. Let's start here with Azure AI Studio. Now, this is a place that you start if you want to do something custom. You want a customized AI solution. You want a lot of control over what you're doing. The concept here is that you are starting with your AI model and having a lot of control over what you can do with it, but that's the starting point, and you can do so much here. This is not a full tutorial on Azure AI Studio, but this should be enough to give you a sense of what it is. So this is my opening screen. You've got all of these things that you can do here. If I click on Explore, you'll see the first thing that happens is that you are given the option to find the right model to build your custom AI solution. So this is the starting point. These are all sorts of models in here. At the time of recording here, we've got 1,624 of them. Let's go in and click on the filters, and you'll see that we've got things here that are models that are coming from Microsoft, as well as Meta, Azure OpenAI, Hugging Face, all of these different things. You've actually got the ability to come in here and choose to benchmark your models. So let's say I want to, and I'm just going to pick at random because honestly for me this is not my world. I don't know all of these things, but let's sort of pick out a couple of things here just to sort of put them into this comparison chart, and you'll see you're getting things that are telling you about the model accuracy, the model coherence. There are a lot of metrics in here and numbers. Now if you know what these things are, this is your world. If you don't, this is probably not going to be for you. And when we get to Copilot Studio, you'll see how that actually allows you to start from a different place where all of this is taken care of for you. But if you want to be able to say, I want to use the GPT-3 Turbo model, or this one, or the Llama model, or whatever it is, or I'm looking for models that will generate images or use vision, things like that, then you can start here and have full control over all of those things. You are also responsible here, if you're doing it this way, for building, deploying everything. So you have that greater control, you have that ability to do those customized things, but it's also going to mean that the time to deployment is much greater. The cost of building it is going to be much greater. Plus you are actually paying for whatever services you choose here. So that cost is a really important factor. So you'll end up with something like this where you have a project, you've got all of these different tools in here where you can fine tune the model, work with the playground. As I said, not so much my area, but lots of things in here that allow you to tweak and play with all of this stuff. Importantly, you've also got control over the search, the index, the data sources. So this is something where we're using the broader Azure tools here. I've got the search in here, so we could come in here and say, I want to work with my data. And you've actually got all of these different kinds of things. So you could be working with your data inside a SQL database, file storage, Cosmos, blob storage. This could be at scale. And then you've also got control here of doing things with semantic ranking, vector indexing, all of these things around the search. Now, I said I'm not going to go deep diving into all of that, but essentially Azure OpenAI is, I'll come back to what Azure OpenAI is in a moment. Azure AI is a place where you can work with all of those models in a very custom way, and you're building a custom AI solution with control over searching, indexing, all of those kinds of things. But the complexity is quite high. Azure OpenAI Studio, which I accidentally mentioned before, very similar concept, but this is just the OpenAI models. So this is where you're working with those models that are used underneath ChatGPT, whereas the Azure AI Studio is actually giving you, if we go back to our Explore here, models across a whole lot of other providers. So those are the tools that are available to you in there. Now, the difference between these things and working with Copilot Studio, just as a starting point, if I go back to my home here, look at all these things. We're starting to talk about custom AI assistants, Azure AI on your data, multi-modality SDK code is another factor in here, but it's not as simple as just pro code versus low code, but there's another C word for you. This is the starting point for Copilot Studio, completely different experience. Now, this is a SaaS product. So the difference here is that if you're working with Azure AI Studio, you are building, deploying, maintaining, doing all of those things yourself from start and all of the maintenance as you go. This is basically ready to go for you, providing a bunch of stuff out of the box. I don't have to, in fact, I can't choose my model as a starting point here. But importantly, this is a tool that is allowing you to do some other things. So you can build your own custom Copilot. That's the first option there, which is basically building out an experience that can contain both generative AI and conversational orchestration. We'll come back to that in a moment. You can also extend the Microsoft Copilots that are already provided. So Microsoft 365 Copilot is the main one here. That's the one that sits inside Teams and Word and Outlook and all of those things. So if you want to take that experience and extend it to plug into your data sources, but run the whole thing through that Microsoft 365 chat experience, you can do that here. But to be clear, this product comes with its own standalone license. It's US $200 per tenant per month, depending on how much you're using. You can add capacity in there. You don't have to have Copilot from Microsoft 365 to use this, but if you do have this, this is the tool that you can use to extend that. I'm going to focus on the Create a Custom Copilot here for the rest of this video though, because I don't want to confuse those things with the first-party Copilots, even though that's the extensibility experience in here. So what this allows you to do is to create your own custom Copilot. Like I said, this is an out-of-the-box solution. Think of it as a nice analogy of if you're old enough to remember having to hire videos or hire DVDs, you have to maintain the machine that you use and you go out and get them and you've got all this hardware. This is like Netflix. You've signed up and it's just there and you just consume what you want. So this ability to, you don't have to maintain, you don't have to deploy anything, it's ready to go. So what happens here when you come in to create a custom Copilot is you have options to do two quite different things. More than two, but the two that I'm going to focus on here. So if we go to, say, create a custom Copilot, the first thing that happens is it says, do you want to give it some knowledge with generative AI by entering your website? You don't have to just use a website here. You can use this to put in documents from SharePoint. You can upload documents. Of course, I've got one I've prepared earlier. My favorite one here is the Better Health Bot, which is actually connected to a website that is called the Better Health Channel. This is a public service website in the part of the world where I work that helps people find health information. It's very information rich and a really good example that I like to use here. So I've basically pointed my Copilot at that experience. So let's talk about the generative AI experience first, and then the conversational orchestration experience, which is a really important part of what you get if you work with Copilot Studio that's very different from Azure OpenAI. So Azure OpenAI, I've chosen my model, I've worked with all these complex data sources, picked up my indexing, all of those kinds of things. This one, all I've done is paste that URL in and that's it. So I can just come in here and say, what should I do if I need to call an ambulance? And what that's going to do is just take my question, refer to that data source, and it's using the services that are built in here to generate an answer for me, including a link back to that website. Now, I didn't do anything here other than point to that URL. What this is doing under the hood, it's using a GPT 3.5 turbo model at the time of recording, which is April 2024. That's actually hosted on the Azure OpenAI service underneath. But I didn't do anything about that. I don't need to know that. I'm telling you that because it's in the documentation. But this is this idea of a SaaS product. I can just come in and that's all set up for me. So the difference here is that there's no complexity. The cost is much more controlled, but I don't have the amount of control and customization that I had when I was looking at the Azure OpenAI service or the Azure AI service. The idea here, though, is that the time to value, the time to being able to use it is super quick. I could just plug in my data source and it's ready to go. So you really have to think about what kind of solution you're looking for. Do you really need something custom? Really? These large language models and the large language model you've got access to here is highly sophisticated. If you're going to go in and start customizing large language models or building your own models, that is something that needs a team of data scientists. It needs a lot of expertise, and awesome if you've got that and your use case genuinely needs it, and you'll pay the costs associated with it. So you need to weigh up that cost, complexity, customization. But do consider this. This is actually something that with some of the tweaks, and I've got a whole video here on how to get the most out of this generative answers capability, you can actually go quite far with this. So just really weigh up the costs of those things and what you actually need. Now, the other really important part, the third C, how many am I up to so far? And by the way, don't forget to give this video a like. It helps get it out to other people, and comment how many C's you found in here. So the other thing here is this conversational orchestration. What we mean by that is that if your whole solution is just generative answers, which is what I've done here, I can just plug that in or plug in my SharePoint data sources or whatever it is, and off it goes, and that's it. But that's not always the case. So we've got an example here, for instance, where we've got what should I do if I need to call an ambulance. So we might want, for this particular question, instead of just directing people to that website, we might want to give them some more information. So one of the things that happens in Australia here is that there are other services other than an ambulance. Some people will call an ambulance for things that aren't emergencies and block up the system. So what we can do here is direct them in a controlled way. This is this idea of conversational orchestration. I want to actually control the experience so that for certain topics, the conversation is forced down a predetermined path with things like variables and answers and specific questions, or I could plug into other systems. So I want control over some of those things. And then this generative answers is my fallback. And this is quite common. If you think about your use case, if you're just starting with a model and that's all you want, your whole solution is just generative AI with Azure OpenAI, that's awesome. But if you want this control over the topic, then this is something you can do here. The Azure Bot Framework, which has now got a different name that I'm just going to check on the side here because they do keep changing things. So this is also called the Azure AI Bot Services now. You can do a similar thing there. That is a high code solution, though. You are actually starting to customize things. You'll have more control over the interface of what's going on. Not going to demo that one here, but that is a sort of a high code way of doing it. And these things do work together as well. So let's have a look at this concept of a topic. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new topic. Now this is where it gets a little bit meta. So we're going to go, I'm going to create a topic from, I'm going to use Copilot to build me a topic for my Copilot. Are you following? This is essentially the ability to say, let's call this one calling an ambulance or whatever it is. I can say create a topic too. So if you saw the old Power Virtual Agents or you've worked with creating bots in the past, you have to give it sort of examples of what are the prompts, what are the things that the user is going to type in that will trigger this conversational path. You don't even have to come up with the phrases yourself now. This is actually really clever. So I'm just going to copy paste something I've done before rather than watching me type. Help a user to understand when they should call an ambulance and when they should go to a doctor instead. So this is now going to create a topic for me and I can edit it. So there we go. That's come up faster than I can explain it. We're going to bring this along here. So it's come up with the trigger phrases here: call an ambulance, emergency medical assistance, need immediate help. So these are the kinds of things that the person might type, and this is actually going to then redirect when people do that into this topic. It's actually come up with a message generated for me. Now I can edit all of these things. I will show you the editing in a moment. So here we go. Call an ambulance if, visit a doctor if. This is pretty good. So what I can do now, let's just go over here and grab this one again. What should I do if I need to call an ambulance? And you'll see what happens now is that it's gone into this topic. So we can see the little ticks on the side. I'm working this, by the way, just all in the test studio. In the end, this Copilot actually gets published somewhere externally on a website, or if it's an internal use case into Teams, there's a heap of channels and things, but I'm just showing you the mechanics behind the system here. It does become not just in the test canvas, but you'll see it's actually gone into this ambulance topic. And instead of the first time round, it's used generative answers as that fallback to find the answer from the data source I gave it. Now it's coming in and giving me the controlled path. Let's do something a little bit more sophisticated here. We're going to create another topic from a description. Again, we'll call this one ambulance, and I'm going to give it a little bit more. So the first sentence is the same as what we had before, but now I'm saying the bot will be used in Australia where the emergency number is 000. Ask if the emergency is life-threatening. If the emergency is not life-threatening, they should go to a priority primary care centre. Try saying that 10 times fast. Now, hopefully someone genuinely using an emergency is making a phone call, but anyway, we're helping them out. So you'll see what happens here. We'll just close this down, is that it's come up with something different. So we've got those trigger phrases again. You can edit the trigger phrases. So you'll see here the dial 911 for an ambulance is actually something that isn't quite right for my context. So I can actually go in and change those things as well. And then what we've got is it's actually created a whole topic here that says, is the emergency life-threatening? It's looking for a Boolean answer of yes or no. And then if it is, we're going to go to this message that says, please call 000 immediately. And if it's not, then it's going to do that. And then we could actually add in a link to those things. You could use this to escalate to an agent. You could use this to post to another system or get information from another system. So you can do a whole lot here with the topics. And this is this idea of conversational orchestration. So Copilot Studio, actually, let's demonstrate this before we go any further. So the same question that I had before, what should I do if I need an ambulance? And we'll watch it go through here. So it's coming up with this question, is the emergency life-threatening? No. And now it's going to go down that path. So Copilot Studio here is actually doing two different things. It's doing that generative AI stuff, plug into your data and just answer those questions, but it's also able to do that conversational orchestration thing so that you have control over the things that you want to have control over. How many C's did you find in the video, by the way? I think there's at least 6 in there. So the concept here, Azure AI Studio, you're going to use that where you want control over your model, customization over your model, if you're primarily about building out a complex AI solution. Whereas if you're in a world of, you want to be able to create this custom Copilot, you want to be able to not have to deal with all of the maintenance and all of those things, and you're just ready to go, and you want to do this conversational orchestration, that's all good as well. The thing where we do have the crossover of being able to use both is that you can actually use this generative answers to pull in a model that you've made in Azure OpenAI. So if you do need both of these things, you want this lovely out-of-the-box conversational orchestration experience and the complexity of a model, you can do that. Check out my video here for how you can do that. And thank you for watching.